everybody. Welcome to the Occulture show. Yay! We've been doing this for some time. There's been a reboot, and this is the new and improved Occulture show. I'm Lilith Dorsey, one of your hosts, and this is my other host.
I'm Jason Winslade, your other host. And this is episode 4 of our new season. And we're going to be talking about Eve's Bayou today. But first, tell them what they've won.
Well, if you get in on it pretty soon, we'll send you a free Occulture sticker. But we also have a Patreon, and we really need your support. You can send us stars. We would love for you, if you can't even do that, to like, subscribe, share our work. This is something that means a lot to us, and we really need your support to help keep it going.
Yeah, we sometimes hurt our back when we're digging into the crossroads of pop culture, of occultism and popular culture, and we need help with those chiropractic bills. So any assistance you can lend us so that we can get weirder for you, our loyal fans, and we'll do our best to be as weird as possible. So let's talk about the actual film Eve's Bayou, released in 1997. Directed by Cassie Lemons, as you mentioned. And the most prominent actor in there is Samuel L. Jackson, who was still rising at that point, a couple years after Pulp Fiction. So he was still not the huge name that he is now, but still, getting there. And then most of the cast seemed to be almost exclusively soap opera stars, honestly.
I know. We got Debbie Morgan from All My Children. I stand All My Children, and I see you, All My Children fans out there.
Which is funny, seeing as that that's where Sarah Michelle Gellar got her start too, like Buffy connection there, and then she was on Charmed. Apparently, I'm not a Charmed fan, but she was a seer in Charmed, so she's got that occult cred there as well. A lot of actors that I recognize. I say, I recognize that person, and then the very small Journey Smollett, who would grow up to be the lead female character in Lovecraft Country and Birds of Prey and all that stuff. So
we did an amazing Lovecraft Country episode. So please go back and watch that. We can, you can time travel, and we talk about the old Journey Smollett, and this is the young Journey Smollett.
To see her roots as a child actor, which I did not know about. Now, from my experience, this is a huge thing for you. I was not aware of this film at the time, and I'm surprised, because it is very much the kind of movie that I would have enjoyed back when I used to watch a lot of indie films in the 90s. I watch a lot more TV now than I do films, honestly. But yeah, it's something that, and when I was looking at it, I was surprised that it wasn't adapted from a book, because it felt so literary. It felt like it was a novel come to life, and I was surprised to see that it was an original screenplay. So that,
yeah, I was thinking that too, especially on the reviewing that I did before we taped this. Just the words are so magical, and we're so used to, I think, having scripts that are less than, and unfortunately with this whole giant writer's strike and AI horrors, that I think that a lot of the time scripts are going to get worse. But this is just almost, these words are like an incantation to me, in a way, to take us to another space and time, right? We're in 1962. We're outside of New Orleans, somewhere in this, fictional town called Eve's Bayou. Yeah. So it takes us where we have the known, and then we're moving into this unknown land, and this sort of wild, right? Like in voodoo, we talk about Bosal, like going into the woods, going into the jungle, going into this kind of wild area. And what does that mean? And for me, the thing that I was struck with too is this is very much a coming of age story.
Yeah.
And I think I didn't see it as that at the time, but it really is talking about this kind of what it means to have this transition. She goes over and over again about she's 10 years old and her sister Cecily's 14. So these are both pivotal times, I think, in a kid's life, where they're sort of navigating, to use the water metaphor, what it means to be a child, what it means to be an adult. and how we can bring these different things to the fore and use them to our best advantage, and hopefully not fall in the pitfalls. When you were talking about that storytelling, I kept thinking about when we talked about water in media for the workshop. We were talking about how so often water is this sort of metaphor for danger, is a metaphor for, these cautionary tales that we have for children to keep them safe, right? Like,
The close
and
to the water
this metaphor,
words,
yeah, this metaphor of this is the water, I think in a way, Lemons transforms it onto the African traditional religions of hoodoo and voodoo, because there's hoodoo that can be safe and cleansing, and then there's hoodoo that can be dangerous. And that's definitely presented in the film. They even says this whole Moselle's line, voodoo, you can't kill someone with voodoo, but spoiler alert, you can.
But just back to the just to the film itself. Looking at the Wikipedia page, that one of the things that it mentions, we talked about this earlier, is that it was it grossed $14 million domestically in a budget of $4 million, making it the most commercially successful independent film of 1997. And let's not sugarcoat this. It's especially at that time, for mainstream American viewers, you generally didn't see a film that was entirely black actors. I think maybe the bartender is a white guy that he's got like a couple of lines and that's it. Like, it's all black actors, and you just didn't see that very often in these mainstream films. So
I agree. And like I said, this was the first film with a black director. We've got a black cast. We've got, Samuel L. Jackson wasn't the icon he is today, but he was certainly somebody who was recognizable to us, right. In 97 as at the forefront of black acting. I love that there's, a Marsalis in there, get my jazz background. You can't have, a.
That white people know from playing with Sting,
Yeah. So you've got these kinds of icon, Diane Carroll, we were talking about the Elzora character. You've got these sort of icons in a way to the Black community that get represented here. And I love that there's so much that rings true for me in this film. Kasi Lemmons has her husband, Vondi Curtis Hall, in here as the sort of indigenous, long-haired, drifter person who comes and ends up with Moselle at the end, So there's this really, to me, truth in the representation of the film. Yes, it surprises me it's not actually a novel. It also surprises me that it's not based on true events, because so much of it seems like things that I think would have been familiar to people.
So I saw in an interview that Kasi Lemmons had mentioned that even though it's fiction, there were elements of her personal life that were sort of put in there, and that she was using as a form of therapy and catharsis. So you can imagine what that might involve. And the other thing about that I think it's so interesting about what we're seeing on film that we don't normally see is that it is a wealthy upper middle class community of Black folks, Creole American community, and you just don't see that kind of thing. And it starts off at this party where there's a lot going on that shows a view of this culture that you don't normally see. So I find that fascinating.
Oh yeah, definitely. I do have to say this too, because we're talking about Kasi Lemmons so much. She was Jodie Foster's partner in Silence of the Lambs in the FBI. Yeah, where they're like training together and she's her best friend and everything like that. So that's really where Kasi Lemmons got her cinematic fame. And she didn't really direct any other major films until Harriet came out. So it was interesting that there was this crossover, and that I think in a lot of ways allowed her to gain access to some of this. It was an independent film, but it still had enough money behind it to make it released in a wide way that we don't see as often as we should, I think. But
it might be good if we sort of summarized the basic premise of this. So they're in this Creole American community where it's a family that's somewhat prominent in that they are descended from the people who started the community. The father, the patriarch, is Samuel L. Jackson, who's the neighborhood doctor, who's very well respected, and gets around in more ways than one. And you know, it starts with this party, and the sort of almost you know, what's that called, that Freudian moment of you know, the young child seeing her father fooling around with another woman, and this sort of sets the tone for what's going on in this community. And a lot of what's happening in the conflict that comes up around the family is the doctor's philandering and the effect it has in the family. It's sort of an open secret almost that people kind of know, but they don't really talk about it. And you know, we know that her mother knows, and it just kind of gets worse from there. And I mean, we can talk about the thing with the Samuel L. Jackson his character and his daughter later, maybe, because that's sort of a big thing about like what's the reality here, whose memory is right. But it does show the way that this community functions and the role that Moselle plays as the neighborhood psychic that people respect. And what I find it interesting is that contrast between her character and the Elzora character, and the conflict between the two. And that Moselle, when she's doing her stuff, is very much it's in the sort of Christian veneer,
Yes.
even though there's
Yes.
hoodoo involved in that, but it's kind of legit. Whereas Elzora is, you know, covers herself with makeup, and we were talking earlier about, well, what accent was Diane Carroll doing? I don't know. And she
I don't know.
you know, but she's seen as sort of an outcast, but yet she still is, you know, she still participates in the literal market of ideas, right? The market that's happening at the Bayou. So there's this conflict between the two. We're like, you're not right. No, you're not right. You know, so I find that interesting from a class perspective as well.
I would even throw Samuel Jackson in there. You know what I mean? This concept of doctor, right? Like we've got Dr. John and all these healers that were sort of off book and folk healers, you know, traditionally in Louisiana. But we've got him as this kind of like, he went to medical school and he's got the bag and the stethoscope, and he doesn't even think what Moselle's doing is real. So he's almost over there on one extreme side, being like, this is medicine. And what Moselle does, they call that consultations, which I think, you know, my priestess still uses the word consultation. Right. It's not reading, it's not magic. You come in for a healing consultation. That's which is what, you know, they say here, you know,
legal cover too, right? Because it's against fortune telling laws and all that. Yeah.
Right. And then you've got the extreme end where it's just, you know, the lady with the snake and the bottles and the hexes and the curses and the feed my jar and all of this, you know, where she's sort of, I have a friend who makes, you know, no fucks left to give t-shirts. She's wearing her no fucks left to give t-shirt. She'll tell anybody off. She's reached that point, you know, that comes with post-menopause where you're just like, forget it, I don't care anymore. So you've got this whole kind of spectrum almost. And I didn't think of it until you were saying it, but I see him really as an extreme. And, you know, he's masculine, he's, you know, science, right? And then you've got this thing that's kind of in the middle of, you know, because a lot of what Moselle does is almost psychology. You know, she's counseling these people, not just on what's happening with the poor person whose kid is a junkie and in the hospital, or this woman who lost all the money. She's like counseling them how to be okay. And there's even that scene where, you know, Samuel Jackson's doctor character goes to this older woman who's having all these money problems, and he's like, you're going to be okay. And she pulls out her gree bag and is like, yes, I am going to be okay. So like she needs that something extra from that world in order to really be okay. It's not just about what science is. She needs that ancestral healing and that knowledge and those herbs and those medicines to heal her and make her complete.
And when Eve asks Moselle, does that work? And Moselle is kind of like, we'll see.
Yeah.
And that's the attitude about voodoo there, that it's like, it could work. It could, you know, it couldn't hurt you.
Well, that's why I mentioned the psychology, because I do think there's this sort of placebo effect,
Right.
that anybody who's a good practitioner knows that that's a part of it. If you believe it's going to work and you have the whoopee or the Dumbo feather or whatever you want to call it, you can fly or you can succeed or you can be healthy or you can heal, whatever it is. But you need that belief. And then you also sometimes need some kind of fetish or charm or gree or something to solidify it for you.
So when Eve asks Elzora to kill her father, and she says, "Well, isn't there something I need to do?" And Elzora's like, "Well, you've already done it. You've already given me the go ahead." And of course it's Eve's actions of goading on the cuckold, um that leads to her father's death. So it is something that she does that leads to it, but there's that thing of like it's
I see it
part of the
as
story.
just, magic plus action,
Right.
and I think most good magic also has to have the action. You can't sit at home and just light a candle and wish you're going to get a job. You got to apply for the job, you got to call, you got to go to the interview, So I think that it really shows that she takes the actions, and it could just be that she took the actions, but she also took the magical actions. So
Hmm.
he's doomed. I mean, the minute I see her take those actions, I think the audience knows, right? Like that it's going to succeed. And it's like a speeding train, literally, right? To use the metaphor, when the train goes through when he's getting shot, that we know this is coming.
Well, the way
It's almost like we're prescient, right?
right. Well, we are because at the beginning the adult Eve narrator starts off with, "This is the summer I killed my father." So like we know he's doomed from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And so that that leads us to that conclusion. So there's and then I think that's also a typical coming of age trope too, is just that notion of not of a child realizing their power, and
Mm-hmm.
not knowing whether it came from them or from circumstances or whatever. So
Right.
there's a lot
Right.
happening there too. But yeah, definitely a coming of age story. It reminded me a lot in some ways, just from my experience, the book Because of Winn-Dixie that my daughter read when she was little. That's it's white girl living in the South, but there's, of course, there's always this character. There is this sort of wise old woman, and in Because of Winn-Dixie, it's a wise old black woman who lives in a house that's somewhat isolated, and she's got all these glass bottles on their trees, like her sort of spirit tree.
Bottle tree. Yeah. Yeah.
Bottle tree, yeah. So there's always that sense of, that's kind of a Southern mysticism, Southern Gothic trope there, is to have that kind of character in there. So yeah, it reminded me a lot of some of these coming of age stories of like gaining wisdom from being around, the young child being around elderly women.
I have a friend that used to joke, "Where's the high priestess? She's out in the middle of nowhere with
Right.
a bunch of old cans and a disability check." No offense, but there's this isolation, right? It's on the liminal. You're in between. There's even like you have to go over a dock to get to Elzora's house, because as a lot of people know, it floods a lot here in Louisiana. So this kind of like, we're in between, we're on this bridge, we're passing over into a different world.
Right.
And what I love this Elzora character, again, there's so much that rings true to it and is such an important lesson for our young Eve, right? She goes, she gives her the hair, she gives her the money, she like gets all these parts that are of her father's essence, basically in order to take him out because of things that he has done. And she doesn't want to believe it's real, but once it's done, she also doesn't want to believe that she can't take it back. And I feel like that's magic 101 almost, right? Like, be careful
Right.
what you wish for. I call it the Twilight Zone effect, right? Like that, because, or the monkey's paw, or whatever's going to happen is not what you thought was going to happen, even though it might be what you asked for. So I think that is one of the reasons it rings true for so many people, because they do recognize this. Okay, I'm going to get somebody's hair. It makes me think, I had a best friend who served time in the military, and when they sent him to Haiti, all the soldiers had to burn the hair from the haircuts and everything like that, because the government wouldn't let that hair out, because then people would be doing voodoo and stuff like that on them. And I thought that was fascinating, even back in the, what was that, the 80s, early 90s, you know, that what, like, oh, I wanted to talk a little bit about the ways of knowing that we see in this film. You know, it hit me when we were preparing for this that we've got these three characters. We've got, you know, I want to call her Red because my daughter has red hair, but we've got this little Journey Smollett as Eve, and we've got, you know, as sort of this young seer coming into her powers. We've got Moselle, who's this sort of, you know, she's this childless, but also, you know, of marrying age. She keeps getting married over and over again and keeps losing
Black Widow.
it. And then, right? And then we've got Elzora at the end, who's sort of this crone, you know, auntie grandmother figure that is just sort of out there and wacko, but they're all right. And they're all accessing the ways of knowing in a different way. And I think that that's really fascinating too, because yes, it's a coming of age story, but it's also a coming of age into this maidenhood, into this womanhood, into this cronehood for each of those different characters as we see it play out. And I think that's fascinating too, because, you know, especially looking at something that I've been watching for what, you know, over 2 decades now, I see myself identifying in different ways with different characters, right? So now I'm almost at the Diane Carroll, Elzora in the swamp with the weird bottles stage, you know? I think that we talked a little bit about the ways of knowing and how that presents itself, but there's also this element of memory, and it almost operates in a cyclical manner, I think, in this film, you know, and that's why I was saying the experimental treatment allows us to circle back through both memory and visions, and that these are things that present themselves not in a time continuum, right? And I think that's what adds to the magical realism, if I can use an oxymoron, that we're, you know, seeing snippets, we're remembering things, there's things we know, there's things we want to forget, like we were talking about in the very beginning of the summer she killed her father, you know. So there's things that I forgot it open that way, even though I just watched it again, like yesterday or the day before, you know. There's, because I want to forget it, right? Like the same way that Eve in a way wants to forget it.
Yeah, there's a lot of we were talking earlier about the record that's left of the encounter that he has with his daughter, where when we first hear about this in the film, it's from the older daughter's perspective, and he's drunk and he comes on to her. And in his perspective, it's the other way around. And in the film, the whole point there is that we don't know, the children don't know what really happened. And even the person that it happened to isn't clear on what really happened. And so they have this, the father's version of events that that says how shocked he was by what the daughter was doing. And they, after he dies, they put that into the Bayou. And you're talking about how the text is almost like this stand-in for the body, for the, you know, the written word as the corpse that is being let go of, to be, you know, we said drown, but it's also just sort of, you know, being sent away. And then there's that kind of burial at sea type of idea there as well.
No, I think it's all the tropes of water magic that, you know, we talked about in the workshop, and I talk about in the water magic book, which you're featured in. But that water can be cleansing, it can be healing, it can be transformative, it can be used to disappear things, right? Like, you know, it's almost as if they're sending it off to another realm. And I think that that's such a beautiful convention to use, because trauma's like that, right? We try and send it off into another realm. We hope we can cleanse it or drown it or transform it, but, you know, whatever, sometimes it floats. And but I love the way that scene just has the paper disappearing with his words and his version of everything going underwater at the same time that they're both weeping and crying. And it's almost that the water flowing from them is sort of parallel to the water that flows in the bayou, and that this water can cleanse and heal and do all these things that we've been talking about.
Yeah, and it has that certain healing quality for the audience, because we are left not knowing what really happened, and there's no resolution with that. And with, you know, with the fact of his death, there's nothing more to do about that. So it's like, you know, they're letting that go.
And I love the words at the end that truth changes color, right? Like, because we've got this film that's changing color back and forth from black to white. And even looking at it now after all those years, it has this kind of washed out look. But I think that
Yeah.
aids to the whole kind of feeling of it, you know, because everything literally looks like it's been washed over. But truth does change color. We've got, you know, all these films where we're looking at perspectives and things like that. And it is different depending on who's looking or when we're looking or where we're looking. All of those things come into play.
Yeah. So, I mean, all in all, it's, I mean, we we're just saying about how, you know, it was great to watch it for the first time for me, you know, 20 something years later. Um, and, it really is such a rich film, so many layers and so many things going on. Because I didn't, you know, when I was watching it, it didn't feel like I was watching an occult film. It is a coming of age story with occult qualities, but yet it still feeds into very occultic themes, of, you know, of truth and memory and story, and all the ways that we talked about, the setting of the water makes it a, you know, a ghost story of sorts as well, because we, you know, I love the way that the husbands that die, Moselle's husbands, they all kind of appear to her, you know, three of them all together at a certain point, and there's this that yeah, that sense of, uh the unknown there. And even the way that these predictions control their lives, the children have to stay in the house when Auntie Moselle has that vision of a child getting hit by a bus or something like that. And when that happens to another child, they're almost like celebrating that, like, oh, it's not us. We can go out and play now.
Yeah,
And it's just
yeah.
so
No,
mundane.
I think no, it's a very delicate treatment of what we do with this information. And bad news to somebody is good news to somebody else, you know. I love that at the closing scene too. Like I was just almost in tears at the end. You know, they're in tears and I'm watching them and we look and we see how I even drew myself a little picture of it, how we see them standing with the trees arching over them and then the reflection of the trees and them in the water on the bayou. So it's almost, yes, it's got ghost story elements. It's also, I feel like it's almost a parallel universe, right? Because we know what's happening in the visible world and then this is what's happening in the invisible world. There's this world of ghosts. There's this world of people who were so important to us, but are now have transitioned to another place. But we can still see them, right, through a glass darkly, through a lens darkly, through a pond darkly. All of those things that they still impact us in that way. And I think that just that one scene at the end just has all of those moments brought together in such a beautiful way.
And it's a great Samhain season film. I mean, this is, you know, being aired in November, but we're recording this basically the day before, you know, Halloween, Samhain Eve, which is kind of redundant, but yeah, it's a perfect sort of film about, not just, you know, ancestors, but, you know, but the immediate, you know, the immediate ancestry of family, um, the people who we are, you know, we're mourning people who we've lost, but also the memories of those people. Um,
Yeah, I mean, and we're talking about all these themes that are so popular right now, not just for Samhain time, ancestral healing, generational trauma, all of those things go into this movie. And I think people weren't even really talking about that much. And some of us were, but not that many people were talking about it. Not like today, it's the flavor of the year. And this is something that people think is important finally, you know, and I think it's beautiful that she managed to get that out there so many years ago.
yeah, so I'm glad we finally got to talk about this. This has sort of been, in our conversation for a while, and now we finally got to actually take a deep dive into it. But coming up in the next few weeks, and the holiday season is around the corner, and we're going to have a bunch of different shows that look at things like independent artists who are selling their wares at markets just in time for the holidays and Black Friday coming up. And then Krampus Fest is just around the corner as well. So we're looking at some Krampus traditions, Krampus, and some ghost stories for winter solstice, because not what better time of year to talk about ghosts than right before the sun comes back. So
I think I'm related to Krampus, but we can get into that later when we do the episode.
Oh, so there's a bloodline? All right. Nice.
There is.
Right.
My ancestral family line is connected to Krampus.
Okay, then. That's something worth exploring. Well, we'll look into that in the coming episodes. So that's it for us this week for the Pop Occulture Show. Once again, thank you for subscribing and following us and checking in on our shenanigans. And and look at us at Patreon as well, at patreon.com/popoccultureshow.
All right. Hopefully we can drop that link in the comments too.
As we do.
They don't make it easy. They don't
we can
make
get
it
it on the
easy
screen. Right there. It's going to be right there.
Okay, there we go. All right.
All right.
Thank you,
See you next time.
everybody.